What's good, y'all? Marcus Frazier from Teachable Tuesdays here to motivate you, encourage you, and inspire you to be a better you. I would like to welcome you to a Teachable Tuesdays Long Car Chronicles, episode 36. Now, I know some of y'all like, what in the world, Marcus? I thought you only did it on Saturdays. Yeah, but remember last week when I missed like an episode, and I think the week before that I also missed another episode, and I told you guys I was going to hook y'all with like 2 extra episodes as a result? Well, here it is. And I figured since I'm going to work and I have a little ways to go to work this morning, why not as we always do? But before we begin, as always, if you could, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button if you want to stay up to date with all of my Teachable Tuesdays content. And without further ado, today's topic is going to be on the discussion of patterns with people. Patterns with people. This was something that I was thinking about this morning. And I had a good talk with my friend last night. And we were talking about patterns with people, and she brought up how, you can tell how people are going to act and kind of predict their movements and the way they go about doing things after a certain amount of time within knowing them. And I told her, true, but I think you could pick that up early on before even knowing someone for a certain amount of time. See, as human beings, we are creatures of habit. What does that mean, in case you've never heard of that saying before? It means that we have a way that we go about doing things. We have a way in which we operate. We have a way that is pretty much conducive to how we move in life, right? Now, granted, I will admit that there are times where it takes people a little bit longer than others to recognize those patterns, if you will, but they can be picked up pretty easily. At least I'm a firm believer of such. So when it comes to patterns with people, there's several reasons to why you have to pay attention to these things and why it's so important. But one of the reasons is, well, basically, when you're getting to know people, you want to know how they are, right? And not even when you're just getting to know people, just people in general. Let's think about your family member, right? Let's think about your mother. Most of you guys, I'm pretty sure if your mother's been active in your life or your dad's been active in your life, you know your parents quite well. You know how they operate, you know how they go about doing things, and so on and so forth. So your mama gets up early in the morning, she gets her coffee, she reads her book, and then after that she prepares for work and probably gets everybody else ready and so on and so forth. That's an example of a pattern that your mom has, a routine, if you will. Sometimes routines can be patterns as well. Or your dad, the first thing he does is wakes up, he goes to work out, prays, and then after that gets his coffee ready. You know what I'm saying? So that's one way that you can identify patterns within people. You can identify it through routines. Another way that you can identify patterns in people is how they act in terms of their actions when it comes to doing things, right? If you have somebody that oftentimes cancels last minute with meetups, with friend groups, and so on and so forth, you could probably identify that there's a pattern that you just know, yeah, they gonna flick last minute. I'll give you an example. One of my best friends, I ain't gonna say his name, El Negro. I love you, brother. You know I do. So my brother has a habit of being the type of person, I think it's because he's introverted, to where he's okay if plans get canceled. He's perfectly fine for the most part. There are times he might feel some type of way every now and again, but for the most part, he's perfectly fine with plans getting canceled. That's just how he is, right? But he will definitely be the type of person, or at least used to be. He's not like that as much anymore. But he used to be very much the type of person to where, we make plans, right? We'd all be getting ready to go out somewhere. And at the last minute, he's like, all right, y'all boys, I think I'm going to stay in. Brother, if you're watching this, go ahead and drop a laughing emoji. Please do. But, oh my goodness, that was his pattern. You know what I'm saying? He was known for, at times, just bailing out. And it might not even be a significant reason. He'd just be like, I don't feel like going nowhere. The thing that would suck is he would jokingly bring certain things up and then bail out. I'd be like, bruh, come on, dog. Like, really? Really, my G? And I'm laughing because, again, that's my dog. Lord knows I love him to death. But that's a pattern. You know what I'm saying? That is a pattern that you could identify as somebody. Or like me, I'll use myself as an example. I've had a pattern in the past of just saying no, not wanting to go to things often. There was a period of time in my life where I was going through depression, if you will. I was going through a lot of mental health challenges. And I said no to everything because I just didn't feel like being around anybody. That's a pattern. Now, that's what we call a pattern of circumstance or a seasonal pattern, but it's still a pattern nonetheless. And that's just as important to know when it comes to knowing people, because then you can identify when patterns are off. And when patterns are off, it's still a pattern. It's an off pattern, but it's a pattern. And the reason why that's so important is because when somebody's acting abnormal and they start to present off pattern behaviors, then you can sense that something is wrong. I'll give you an easy example. I can identify this with my students, right? If I have a student that's typically happy-go-lucky, always in a good mood, and that's their pattern, now every once in a while, if they're not in a good mood, not a big deal. Such as life, it happens, unless it is a big deal and there's something really big going on. But if I notice that there's a consistent pattern of them not being as upbeat, as happy-go-lucky, I'm going to sit down and like, hey, what's going on, man? What's going on, sir? Everything good? Because I'm noticing that there's an off pattern and it's something that I'm picking up. And just as important as it is to pick up patterns, it's just as important to pick up off patterns. Or we also call it as an alternative, pattern changes. And I think pattern changes are important to pick up because number one, you can identify something abnormal that is going on within that person. And or number two, the dynamics of, what in the world was that? That was weird. The dynamics of certain roles may change within that, platonic friendship, or maybe a romantic relationship, or, business partnership, or family, or whatever the case may be. All of these are important to pick up. Let's give an example from a relationship standpoint. If you're getting to know somebody, let's pretend that you got a man or you got a woman, and normally they're consistently texting you good morning, good night, they're calling you, they're wanting to spend time with you, and then all of a sudden they pull back, right? That's not a normal pattern. That is what we call an off pattern. Not because they do it once, but they start to allow it to happen consistently. We call that a pattern change. So you might wonder, what's good with the pattern change? Why are things different? So on and so forth. Well, there could be a number of reasons, and we're not going to really get into those reasons on this video, but nonetheless, actually, we'll get into it a little later. We'll talk about it a little later. But nonetheless, that's still a pattern change. You got to notice that obviously that's something different, right? So when you think about all these things, right? You think about the why, the pattern change, and so on and so forth. The first step is obviously noticing there has been a pattern change and going about figuring out why that pattern change is, because, ultimately that can affect their livelihood, or it's already affecting their livelihood. And that might affect the dynamic between you and the other individual. Again, this is all around the board. This is for friendships. This is for romantic partners, potential romantic partners. This is for people you work in business with, co-workers, colleagues, family members, mentees, mentors, you name it. It goes all across the board for all spectrums of life when it comes to dealing with human beings and even animals. You think about animals, and you got your dog, and you notice that your dog is normally up 6 o'clock in the morning, trying to wake you up, all excited, basically saying, feed me, bruh, walk me, bruh, I'm ready to go. You might not even be a morning person. You might just be straight up annoyed, but that's how your dog operates. And then all of a sudden, literally for 2 weeks straight, your dog doesn't wake up as early. They're very slow, if you will. And at first, you might be thinking, thank God. But then you think about it, and you're like, wait. Something ain't right. Why my dog ain't acting like this? He or she normally up and at them and just getting on my nerves, and now they just all of a sudden chill. I ain't gave them no chill treats or nothing. They ain't had no surgery recently to slow them down. And then you take them to the vet because you just noticed they ain't eating. And then the vet tells you, yeah, your dog is like sick. That pattern change came about because of an unexpected circumstance. Another reason why it's important to pay attention to patterns. Patterns sometimes involve health. Patterns sometimes involve, or pattern changes sometimes involve lack of motivation. I'm gonna be real with y'all. As the recording of this video, I have not been working out as much lately. I have not felt motivated. I know that's bad. That's absolutely horrible. Next week, I got to get back on it because I don't want to start gaining weight again. But that was a pattern that was going on for me because I just hadn't been motivated. Right? I'm going to give you one more example, and then we're going to tie into a new segue when it comes to patterns. Let's pretend you are, I always got to put a dating one in there somewhere. You're dating a young man or a young lady, or a man or a lady, depending on your age, right? And it seems like things are going great at first. They're constantly communicating. They're looking forward to seeing you. And then all of a sudden, you go out on a date, or maybe you guys hang out, and then afterwards, the pattern changes. They start to act a little distant. They don't text you as much. Hanging out with them suddenly becomes a chore. It's almost like pulling teeth. So when you get to that aspect, you're thinking, and this kind of goes back to what I'm saying, we're about to go ahead and dig into this now. What changed? What happened? Well, there's a number of things that could have happened. I know I said we weren't going to talk about it, but let's talk about it. Because now we're talking about the things that pattern change. Like I said with the dog, the dog, it was health related, right? Sometimes it could be family related. Sometimes it could be something that you did. And since we're on this subject, I'll admit that the sucky thing about dating is people won't even tell you what you did wrong. They'll just fade away. They'll just start to act different. Pattern change, and won't let me tell you why that pattern is changing. They just move differently now. Maybe you gave them the ick. They still move differently. You know what I'm saying? And that brings me to the next part. Sometimes you're not going to understand why a pattern changes with people or changes with things. Which leads me to my next segue. What do you do in life when pattern changes start to happen? And that throws you off your game when it comes to dealing with people, circumstances, maybe it's your job, whatever the case may be. Well, the best people simply do this. They adjust. I'll repeat that. The best people simply do this. They adjust. And I bring the adjustment factor up, which, by the way, if you made it this far in the video, go ahead and give the video a like and, leave a comment below. Say what's up. All that good stuff. I don't normally do this, but hey, I'm starting to kind of take away from other YouTubers. But the reason why I bring this up is because life does not follow the same pattern all the time. Right? You could be working at one job today, and then tomorrow, next thing you know, you're going to have to go get a new job. Or you decide to get a new job. You could be in that relationship one day, and then, like, literally, something don't work out. And then a year later, you in another relationship with somebody totally different set of circumstances. You could be living in one state one day and decide, you know what? I'm going to just pack it up and move. I'm ready for something different. Now you done move from Atlanta to Wisconsin. I know some of y'all like, ugh, that's a weird move. No, it happens. Or you move from California to Boston. Right? It's just the way it is. Things will never be the same, as Tupac would say. Right? You got to be willing to adjust. Now, those are expected pattern changes. And I think it's very easy to adjust to the expected pattern changes. Well, see, at least some of the things I listed. But some of those things I listed are unexpected pattern changes, is what we call it. And unexpected pattern changes are very oftentimes the hardest ones to adjust because we didn't see those things coming. It's one thing if you know you about to get fired from a job. You didn't already start looking for a new job. You done prepared. You adjusted. It's one thing if you know somebody about to break up with you and you see the signs. You kindly mentally preparing yourself. You're not necessarily going to get into another relationship, but you're good. You know what's coming. It's one thing if you know you got to move out, or you know you're going to move out within 6 months and get a new place. It's like, all right, cool. But what happens when, think about those fires that happened in California. So many homes were affected. What happens when something like that happens? What happens when, God forbid, if you were to get fired without proper cause? Because Florida is a right-to-work state, and that can happen. I'm pretty sure there are other states just like this one. What happens when a family member that was close to you passes away? What happens when you have an unexpected sports injury, right? Nobody expects negative circumstances to take place on a particular day. What happens if your car breaks down? That is something that disrupts your pattern based on your routine or based on the way you do things. So now you're thinking to yourself, well, betcha by golly wow, how in the world am I going to, rectify this? And I'm going to be honest with you, that can be a little bit tough. I'm not even going to hold you. You just have to adjust the best way you can. And I'm not saying that you'll adjust right then and there. Of course not. Life ain't that simple. And if you think life is that simple, keep living. You ain't lived enough. Not here to offend nobody, but I'm gonna offer you a spectrum of truth. I'll give you a life example real quick for myself. Something that was expected and something that was unexpected. Let's do the expected first. When both of my grandparents passed away, that was an expected pattern change. Because both of my grandparents had been sick for quite some time. Especially my grandfather. Grandmother was a little bit off guard because she kind of got sick suddenly, but we still had time to prepare. But, yeah. The pattern change with that was I'm not able to call my grandparents once every 2 weeks like I used to check up on them or visit them while I'm at home. You know what I'm saying? And best believe that junk still hurts to this day. Hurts a lot. But that was an expected pattern change. Let's talk about an unexpected pattern change that takes place. I'll use an example for that. I remember I was dating somebody back, I want to say 2 years ago. Seemed like things were going great. All of a sudden, we would text every morning. We would call probably once or twice a week, but we didn't call each other that much because we saw each other at least once a week. So it was like, we don't got to call each other that much. We're seeing each other. Well, imagine getting ghosted in a relationship. Yeah, you're like, what, Marcus? How you get ghosted in a relationship? Yeah, it happens. Just when you thought you saw it all. And then literally, you don't hear from this person for 2.5 days. You're trying to contact them, seeing, if everything's okay. You sense something is wrong. And then literally, 2-3 days later, they break up with you. They say sorry for ghosting you, but needless to say, I no longer want to pursue a relationship with you. That was an unexpected pattern or pattern break. I can't say it was an unexpected pattern. Well, yeah, I guess you could say that. The unexpected pattern was the ghosting part. But that was a pattern break. And that rocked my world. Because it was just like, oh, it ain't. And I can laugh about it now, but it wasn't a funny matter back then. One of my homeboys, I remember him telling me, he said, man, I'm surprised your villain arc ain't begin then. I was like, man. I say all that to say this as we prepare to wrap up this video. Knowing patterns of people is very important. So you can know where you stand at with people. And so you can know how to go about your life when it comes to dealing with people. But pattern changes do happen. Pattern breaks do happen. And you have to be willing to adjust when those pattern breaks happen. You have to be willing to look at a situation and say, you know what? I know this was unexpected, but I'm going to keep it moving. And you might be thinking, well, Marcus, it's easy to say that when it comes to little pattern changes that don't disrupt your life. What about big ones? You still got to be able to keep it moving. Will it take you a little bit longer to make those adjustments? Yeah. Will it take you a little bit longer to kind of get on your feet with certain things? Yeah. You still got to be willing to move. You know what I'm saying? Patterns in life are never meant to stay the same. They were always meant to change. They was always meant to be rearranged. And some patterns may come off as kind of strange. Bars. But you still have to keep it moving. All right? Marcus Frazier from Teachable Tuesdays here to motivate you, encourage you, and inspire you to be a better you. Thank you for joining me today. Greatly, greatly appreciate it. As always, if you like the video, leave a like, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment for the algorithm because that definitely helps with the channel. And I'll see you guys soon.